Okay, well, as Andy said, I'm Marcy, and super excited to be here. It's my first time at this meetup. He also mentioned I live near Seattle, Washington, back in the States. I co-run the Accessibility Seattle group, so I love coming to accessibility meetups just because we hear about such great things that we can use in our work, regardless of what role we have. Okay, so we're going to embark on a bit of an experimental journey. I have a React and Gatsby application that I'll give you a demo of what this looks like and what Gatsby is and all of that. But what I really want you to take away from this talk is a process of looking at React and JavaScript applications and trying to debug them and figure out what's wrong so that you can either fix them or communicate to developers what's missing for accessibility. It is unfortunate that a lot of JavaScript-heavy applications and websites are not built with accessibility. There are some, and we're trying to change that and do the best we can. It is true that some simpler websites with only HTML and CSS can be a bit more accessible, but it is possible to make an accessible JavaScript application. So we're going to talk about what that process is like, starting with debugging and looking at things that are broken so that we can try and either fix them or recommend fixes to people. So I recently joined a company called Gatsby.js, and it is a startup. We're all remote, pretty much, but Gatsby is a website building framework that's built on top of React. So I recently picked up Gatsby to build a new version of my own website. And what I really like about it is that I can use modern tools like React and lots of JavaScript and plain CSS. I'm a big fan of regular CSS. But it will output static web pages with HTML that render from a server, just like traditional HTML pages do. And they're really fast. So it's great for performance, much better than the predecessor of my site, which was a WordPress site. WordPress is great. It enables a lot of workflows. But sometimes the pages that it would create are not really fast. And you have to do a lot of work to make them work better on mobile. So what Gatsby does is allow you to create these really fast web pages. And I'm bringing this accessibility element to the company. Fortunately, there's lots of people there that care about accessibility already. So it was a great foundation. So I'll tell you more about Gatsby as we look through this application. So if you want to follow along, I haven't quite pushed up the current version of this application, but I will after tonight when I'm out of here with more internet connection. But it will be on my GitHub, and my GitHub name is Marcy Sutton, and then the repo is empathy-driven-development. And I can share it on Twitter after tonight. So we're going to do a journey through this application that I've built intentionally with accessibility problems, which is kind of difficult to retrain my brain or break it for a minute to try and make something really inaccessible. And we have the opportunity of making this interactive. So if you have questions, if you want to poke more at something, feel free to either raise your hand and we can give you a microphone, or you can use the Slido app, sounds like. Andy, are you going to be monitoring that? Okay, so you have options. So feel welcome to just ask, because we have this good sized room and we have this unique format that we can work with. So let's look at this application. It's got a few components in it. So we're primarily going to be looking at components, so smaller chunks of user interfaces that are built with React and CSS, and they output CSS and HTML. But I've used a lot of patterns that are common out there that I see people get wrong a lot. And we'll look at a sidebar that's like a sliding menu thing. There's a couple of forms on here, which pretty common are not made accessible. I have a carousel that I have taken from W3schools.com, which I always had a hunch that W3schools, I'm not a huge fan of theirs, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then I went and looked at their carousel tutorial, and I really figured out why. And then we've got a modal dialog. And so this is like just the beginning. Like we're definitely not going to cover all of it. I'm not covering everything there is to know about JavaScript applications. We're just going to look at the process. So that's the primary takeaway, is the process of debugging and coding for accessibility. I do have some resources in this README that I'll share on Twitter and afterwards that, there's some tips in here for developing for JavaScript applications, reminding all of us of like, who are we building stuff for? And especially at mainstream conferences where I tend to hang out a lot, I'd like to remind people that, if you're building websites and applications, are for people, right? Isn't that what we're doing here? And I feel like developers and designers and business people, like the whole business sometimes, just like they get distracted by the shiny things and don't make things that work for people. So that's what I care a lot about. There's also some resources on testing, like manual testing, which is a really great place to start. There's some automated testing and so on. So let's go over to the browser. I think, if I can remember which. Nope. Space Jam. You're getting a sneak peek at another talk that I'm working on. I think, there it is. Okay, so I have this outdoor trip organizer. So it has all these components kind of put together. And to describe what's on the screen, so there's a menu button in the top left, there's a heading, there's another icon button in the top right, there's a form that looks a lot like a transit or rail application, like if you're booking tickets and things. It's mainly the functionality that I wanted to show is the brokenness of the form, because I see that quite often. There's an image here, and if we click into the menu, it slides over. I can close it with the mouse. Might give you a little hint that I'm using the mouse. There's a modal, and when I open up the modal by clicking on the icon button, it's actually sending my focus into the modal. I didn't have to do that. The modal package that I used, React modal, is handling some accessibility for us, but not all. And I think my close button isn't even working, so that's great. But if I were looking at this application for accessibility, the first thing that I would do is start tabbing with my keyboard. So I'm just going to do that. Let's hit the tab key a few times. So down at the bottom, I can see my status. The URL all the way at the bottom is going through some stuff that I can't see. And that happens a lot with mega menus, parts of web pages that are hidden visually, but they haven't actually disabled. So I'm guessing that's in this menu. And yeah, so that's what's happening. My menu is when it's in its closed state, the items inside are not being properly hidden from keyboard and screen reader users. So that can be really frustrating if you've got a giant menu with a bunch of things in it and you're a keyboard user and you're just trying to get through. Maybe there aren't skip links and it's like, oh, why am I in? Especially if you're a sighted keyboard user and you're like, where am I? So we'll go fix that. My focus is on an item in the menu, and it would be great if I could hit the escape key. Oh, that actually worked. Wow, I'm surprised. Because like a lot of times, even simple things like closing menus, exiting things, the convention is that if you use the escape key, it should close and send your focus back to where you came from. But that is often forgotten. So if we keep going through here, I was tabbing, so we've got a few things we could fix. We've got these form inputs, some of which are not fully functional, and we'll run an automated checker to see kind of the health of some of those. And that's pretty much it. The modal, I guess, we didn't get to the modal. So there's another instance of a control in this user interface that we can't get to from the keyboard. So if I were debugging this application, I would first go through it with keyboard like we just did, and then I might go, wait a minute, I missed something. Why is that? And I can go control click or use the keyboard shortcut in Chrome to open the developer tools. And sure enough, the sign up button is just a div with an icon in it. Raise your hand if you've ever seen that before. Yeah, kills me. Because there's a perfectly good element for that. It's a button element. But that's a pretty easy change, at least. We can fix that. I see a header landmark, so that's pretty cool. And Gatsby, so with Gatsby, when you install it, you can use what are called starters. And it's like a set of templates and like the basics to get you up and running with a Gatsby site. And those have some landmarks in them. So that got me going in that area. So I've identified a couple of problems. The next thing that I would do after kind of figuring out which controls are not reachable, so in the POR of perceivable, operable, understandable, robust, we have found that there's stuff that isn't reachable or operable. So we can fix that. So the next thing that I would do is probably use a browser extension. And I used to work at DQ, who makes the Axe extension, so I have that installed. We'll use that. And I can run an analysis on any web page. I could run it on a local file URL if I go and change the options a little bit, but I've got this running on localhost, so I can go run this. And it found a number of buttons in this form that have icons. So they were reachable, but they didn't have what's called accessible names. So that's something we could go and fix as well. Like if it has an icon, it needs some sort of a text label to make it more accessible in assistive technology. So we've got 3 of those. There's some color contrast issues, and like visually looking at this, the one item that really stood out to me that would need to be fixed was this white text of outdoor trip organizer. It's over kind of a, I don't know, lavender, periwinkle blue color on the background, and I've sort of trained my eye to identify text that I think doesn't meet color contrast ratios. So that text color, I guess I'll show you how I would debug that right now. So in the Axe extension, I can hit Inspect Node, and it will take me over to the Chrome Developer Tools. And now in Chrome, there is this fantastic tool in the Dev Tools. So I went into the Styles panel, so Elements panel, then off to the side, there's a Styles area. And if I click on a color swatch, I get a color contrast ratio tool now with these lines that'll show you for WCAG, AA, and AAA what color values would work on top of that background color. So it looks like white is a no-go with this blue background color, but if I drag it down into the dark grays or blacks, then my contrast ratio is above the threshold. So that I've found, like that workflow of using an extension like Axe and then going over to the dev tools and finding a color that works, it's awesome. Especially if you're working with a design team and you just need to like change it a little bit and don't tell anyone and get away with it. Because then it might still look close enough to brand colors or the colors that they thought a lot about, but they don't quite meet contrast ratios. Maybe you can just like fudge it a little bit. And so this color contrast picker is a game changer. So, and I think now if you hover over an item, I've been hearing about there's like some hover part of dev tools, and if anyone knows how to get to that, I don't actually know anymore. So when I hover, and
be in the select element. I can't remember what the tool's called. The left-hand button on the dev tools.
oh yes, okay. So in DevTools there is a select an element button. It's like the first in the DevTools tab bar. Which, by the way, side note, the Chrome team is actually doing a lot of work to make the DevTools more accessible, which is really awesome. I know that they've started with the elements and like styles, and if you're using either Chromevox or VoiceOver now, you can do a lot more to actually manipulate the DOM in the browser, so that's pretty cool. It's not quite there for just regular keyboard support without assistive technology, which was my biggest wish list item, because that's the thing about like all of the the improvements that we can make for people who really rely on the keyboard and they can't bail out and just start using a mouse or a trackpad. For a lot of us that have like repetitive use injuries and things, that keyboard support can really enable us to keep getting our work done. So it would help everyone if they did a little bit more for keyboard users. But if I use this button, now, thank you for the tip. So now if I have the DevTools open and I've selected an element, I can go hover over it and it'll give me some of that same information. So it's giving me the name of the element, which is an anchor. It's giving me some dimensions, the font color, which is white. It tells me a little bit about the font and then the contrast ratio. Like, how cool is that there's a contrast ratio right there? I mean, I had to hover to get to it, so anytime I even hear the word hover now, I'm like, ooh, does it have a keyboard support? But that's so cool because that's mainstreaming accessibility debugging for color contrast, which when they ran Axe Core, which is the underlying JavaScript in the Axe extension, when the Chrome team ran that against the HTTP archive, which I think is the top 500,000 websites or something, I forget how many, but color contrast is far and away the #1 accessibility problem, which is why it's a good thing to train your, like if you can see the screen, if you can train your eye to kind of identify colors that don't pass the sniff test, so we say, then that gives you a little bit of a head start to go and debug. But that's okay because now we have way better tools. Like everyone can go and debug this now. And there's other tools I use, like the Paciello Group's Contrast Analyzer, which is a desktop application. I like that one because I can test colors in PDFs, other things that aren't in the browser, which is really cool. So we've got another thing to fix here. So let's go back to Axe. So we've got some color things we could fix. There's the heading, and then I have a link down here at the bottom. It says copyright 2019 built with Gatsby, and then this gray link. I mean, I couldn't even really see it there. It's funny, I put this in here intentionally and then I couldn't even see it, so I kind of forgot. Which I think is how stuff happens. Like maybe you got a theme that you downloaded and you only changed some of the stuff and it happens. So now we have these tools that make it so much easier to figure out what's going on. There's some missing form labels. So this is where these tools are super helpful because for a lot of folks who don't use or test with assistive technology very often, this can just point out to you what's missing. And in this case, I have a couple of inputs that have our friend, the placeholder attribute, which it's like in quotes to me, it's kind of like a frenemy that like, we love the placeholder. It's cool, it puts text in the input. But people rely on it a lot, and they don't add a real label. And in a lot of assistive technology and browser combinations, the placeholder is not enough. And I've heard some discussions about maybe they'll make placeholder part of what's called accessible name calculation, where they will count it as part of it. And it's kind of not across the board, it's not consistent. But enough people have used placeholder instead of a label that like maybe we'll get that eventually. Yeah, it's like, would we rather kind of lower the bar and just make it work? Or, I don't know, we'll just run the risk of people not adding labels, so we might as well expose something. But if you want to debate, we can debate about it. Okay, so we've got labels missing. There's a couple of text inputs. There is a select here for the type of trip. So this organizer would be like you type in the name of a trip, the name of an area that you're going to, which might hint, what sort of activities are you going to do there? Is it snowy? Are you going to like take your animals on a hike or something? Go play outside, because I need to get away from the computer sometimes and get outside. So what I would do with this organizer is like catalog these things and then maybe generate a gear list for me to go check off. Like, oh, I'm trying to get out the door quickly. I'm going to generate a list of all of the things that I would take with me. And so that's what this sort of form data collection is intended for. So there's a select here with a number of items, like going out in a van, going out in the backcountry, or going out on a kayak. So I need to go add a label to that one. There is an item here without a landmark. Oh, there's no main landmark here at all. So there's two rules in Axe that are sort of similar. So there's one that says all page content must be contained by landmarks. And looks like that's it already told us that it's everything that is in the main content area should be in a main landmark, but I didn't add one. So that's a pretty easy change. We can go and fix that. So we've got keyboard. We looked at color contrast. We looked at the Axe extension. The next step, we can go fix things, but like the next major thing I would do is run a screen reader. So we'll play VoiceOver. We could go click through this app a little bit more and go see what else is in here. Here is the wonderful W3schools Carousel. So you can probably guess what this is like. So it's got some images. It has previous and next buttons. Here's a picture of me with my dog as a puppy when he was too small and we had to carry him. There are the little dots at the bottom of the carousel that you can click. But if we tab through the page again, let's go through our sidebar that's not actually open or not actually hiding the items. And I can't get to anything on this carousel. Maybe the previous and next buttons, but no, I'm like way past it. Let's see. I can't actually tell, because I think, let's go look. We can go inspect. This is what I would really do, is go inspect, look at the dev tools. Oh yeah, here we go. So there's two anchor tags. This is code I took directly off of the internet. I did not write this. They used anchor tags with no href attribute, which I see a lot. So for some reason, I don't know, when you're new to HTML and maybe you don't know that much about it, you might pick an element that's not, like you're not using it to its full potential. So I think a button element would probably be better because this carousel is going to require JavaScript. So a button element might be a good fit. We're not going to like progressively degrade this carousel. Like if we were going to do progressive enhancement for this carousel, we would just have a list of images in the markup and you'd just see them all and it wouldn't be interactive. But the anchor elements indicate that we would be navigating somewhere. And that requires an href attribute to make it actually focusable. So these aren't focusable, which is a bummer, but that's a pretty easy fix with the buttons because the power of the sort of like logic that's happening is all in JavaScript anyway, so the anchor's not going to get us much. If we look at the dots, that's just a big box of spans. So it's like you can put click events on anything. People do. I think my biggest disappointment is that this was on a tutorial, on the #1 site that you search for like carousel how-to. Like W3schools comes up first, which is why it has such a bad reputation because they have things like this. But I tried to do a little bit for accessibility. I heard of that ARIA Live attribute before, so maybe it's got some accessibility, right? Let's turn on VoiceOver and see. Or hear, let's listen to what VoiceOver has to say about this carousel.
VoiceOver comment created. You are no longer connected to Hangouts.
Okay,
we are trying to reconnect for you. Merge state.
Okay,
Add
GitHub.
more commits by pushing to the feedback widget.
Does that
Branch
happen
on.
to anyone else?
Gatsby, period. Code owner review.
GitHub, taken over. So this is what I want.
You are online. Merge state. Add more commits by pushing to the useMDX. Branch on.
Give me a
Christopher
break. Okay, so there's this thing that happens. I've also noticed it with WCAG, the standard, like if you have it open in your browser, and also GitHub apparently. There's just something with the way those web pages are marked up. Maybe they have some ARIA Lives in them that it'll just announce like over and over again, and you just have to close the tabs. So my apologies. Let's see if I can actually get this carousel to give us any action.
Home inspiration, gear packing, list friends, outdoor trip organizer inspiration, backpacking with reindeer, the Labradoodle, camping with the dog at a wilderness lake, carrying puppy reindeer on a mountain hike, carrying puppy reindeer on a mountain hike, carrying puppy reindeer on a mountain hike, heavy left pointing angle quotation mark ornament, heavy right pointing angle quotation mark ornament, copyright sign 2019, built with Gatsby Group.
Wow, it's just really going for it.
F5 button, backpacking with reindeer, the Labradoodle, camping with the dog at a wilderness lake, carrying puppy reindeer on a mountain hike, carrying puppy reindeer on a mountain.
Really fun times, you guys. So there's something really bad going on with this carousel. And let's go look at what's happening. So it sounded like, I mean, if we go back and look at this carousel, there was ARIA live on it. So that's the danger of using using ARIA when you don't fully understand it, is that someone might just go slap it on a carousel and just go, I'm done, but they don't actually test it and understand what that is for. So ARIA Live is intended to announce changes to content. So when you change something in your markup, say you're like, you have an announcement off to the side of a user interface that something was saved. You don't want to send the user's focus there, but you want to announce something that's happening. So there would be some use case for that in a carousel. Unfortunately, this carousel has it's not quite a factorial, but it has the alt text for each of these images builds each time. So if we start at image number 1, let's go back here. Image number 1, that one, when I listened to it earlier, that one sounded fine. So it has one alt attribute, and this is using the picture element to create some responsive images. So it looks a little bit different than a plain image carousel. But if we look at image number 2, now there's 2 alt texts in one, and so on. If we keep going, this is like a real thing. I didn't just make this up. Somebody told me that they were testing a site and it had a factorial carousel in it. And like the alt text really, like you go through 1 through 9. By the time you got to 9, I think that would actually be multiplying them. So it ends up like 32,000 instances of the same alt text. It would just crash the browser. But sometimes math can be used like really poorly. And this is an instance where I was like, can I make a carousel that's like almost a factorial? And you can. And it makes really irritating ARIA Live announcements. So that's something pretty easy to fix. Like go remove the math that's adding all of these alt texts together. But what I want you to take away from this is, I don't know, both a little bit of empathy for people who are new to ARIA and like maybe gently hand them a screen reader and an automated checker to be like, did you test this? Just because I know, like when I first started using ARIA, I got it wrong as well. And I remember, handing something off to a colleague who was blind, and he's like, this would be better without the ARIA in it, actually. And we got pretty far with focus management, which is a big topic we're gonna go look at. And then like just using text and things, so that when you manage focus, there's text in it. Use the right HTML elements for the job, and that can get you pretty far without even needing ARIA. So, all right, so I think we've gotten a good survey. We've done a deeper dive into debugging. Now let's go fix some stuff. So if I go back over to, I'm using Visual Studio Code, and I'll give you a little bit of a tour here. So in a Gatsby site, your source, I guess the first thing to start with, really briefly, if you're new to Gatsby, is that you have a configuration file, which is like, you might have some metadata in it. If you have plugins, things like you're pulling content from your file system. So that's where all my images are coming from. You have the ability to do certain things when it uses Node.js as a server. So you can do some server-side things. That's how you output these static HTML files, even though you're writing in React. So that's pretty cool. Most of the code lives in the source directory. So there are pages, which are just like you would imagine, like a page. So you have a JavaScript component for a page. And I won't dive really into GraphQL, but that's another big building block of Gatsby, is you have this data layer that you can reference in your code. And so that's how I'm getting images. Like there's an image on the home page, I'm just getting that one instance. There's some lovely CSS and JS here, there's CSS like inline. They do a pretty good job of taking that code and actually outputting CSS so that it's not just like gross inline or like JavaScript inlines. I don't know. They do a better job of handling it when you're building your site out, so that everything kind of like gets packaged and has better performance. So I don't judge it too hard. So they do a pretty good job. At least there's an image component that is, so when we were looking at the debugged browser, there was like a picture element and a bunch of like data URIs, and it was like, why isn't that just a plain image tag? Well, they're doing a lot of heavy lifting for responsive images and performance. And one thing I'm really happy about is that they will, if you don't put an alt attribute on the Gatsby image component, they will output an empty alt for you, which is really nice. Like, it would be better to have an empty alt attribute than have it read a data URI or like a cached file URL or something like a bunch of random characters. Like, we're not in web publishing where everything had clean file names anymore. It's usually like some completely robotic file name that no one needs to hear in a screen reader. So the alt attribute will get put onto the image by default. Okay, so we've got, that's our home page, and it's got this trip planner. That sounds promising. So trip planner, let's go look at that. So this is a component. It lives in the components directory. So I can kind of group things together, like there's carousel items, there's menu items, there's a trip planner folder that has this like trip planner form thing. And so in the trip planner, this is where the markup that ends up as this static HTML. That's where this lives. And it's a templating language called JSX. And so this is, it renders just plain HTML, but it's sort of super powered. So we can add a lot of logic in here. We can have some really fancy what's the word I'm looking for? Validation, error validation. That would be nice, because you sort of need some JavaScript for that. But I can tell already that there's a number of items we could fix. So there's a button with the title attribute of my trips. Title technically is part of accessible name calculation, so that one's not quite as bad. But there's a number of these divs that have a class name of label. That's another good one. Anyone raise their hand? Have you seen a div with a class of label on it? Yeah, it's like, just come on, like, come on, make it a label element. So we can make those label elements. I'm gonna go ahead and just change this title to an ARIA label on my trips. That button, it didn't have, a lot of these buttons don't have proper accessible names on them. So for assistive tech, it just does not give you enough information. So there's another one that's an expand button. We'll just change that. Let's see, here's another div with a class name of label. We'll change that to a label. I think there's one more here with this select. Change that one. Oh, here's a button that, I guess it has text in it, so it just says go. Oh, here's a button with no label on it. ARIA-label, we'll call it a calendar. Maybe that's like opens a date picker or something. And then I think there's one more here. We'll say ARIA label expand. Expand what? I'm not really sure, because it's not actually fully functional. So you really want to describe in the control what it's going to do. So we've got those so far. This form is in a lot better shape. Another thing that we saw that we could go and fix is that heading. This white text, let's go fix that. So we picked a good color. I think black would be fine. It looks like it's an inline style, so I'm gonna go find where that lives. So if I go back to our home page that we saw a minute ago, there is a component here called a layout component. And this layout component is sort of like my template that wraps my content. And I can kind of put stuff in the layout component so that I don't really have to worry about it. I can just focus on writing what's relevant to this page. So I need to go over to the layout component. And so components are reusable things. You can pass data to them. You can like take a component and then change it a little bit if you want like a custom version of that component. So this layout component pulls in from our Gatsby config file. There was some site metadata in there, like the site name. You could have a description and all kinds of good things in there. So I'm using GraphQL to pull that in. And if you're curious more about kind of the mechanics of Gatsby, there's a ton of really great documentation. So you can check that out. The important things here, I'm going to close this sidebar. So in the markup that this layout component is sort of wrapping around our page contents includes a menu, so that's another component. And so this is sort of unique to JSX, so it's a lot like HTML, but you can put other components in it. So when you see something that you don't recognize as an HTML element, maybe it has a capital letter to start, that's probably a good hint that there's a component. And if we scroll up to the top of the page, there is an import up at the top that's importing another component called menu. It's also importing a header. There's a sign-up form that's the one that's going into the modal, and then some CSS. So I sort of have a mix of CSS, like it's sort of just like polluted across this thing, because that's pretty common. Like a lot of apps are not very well organized. Maybe some spring cleaning would be a good thing to go and fix. So we've got this menu. That was another big item that needed to get fixed. But some quick wins that we could do. Ooh, here's another good one. A div with a class name of main content. Has anyone seen that before? Yeah, it's like, if you're adding a CSS class that you think of as semantic, that's a good tip or a good hint that there's probably a better element for that, including the main element. So this will fix the 2 AXCore rules that we saw that the content was not being wrapped in a landmark. And the main, you want only one. It should be top level, so not contained in other landmarks. So we have a header here, and header is a component called header, but it uses the Semantic HTML5 header element. It's just like we have a component with the same name so that it's like easily memorable in your code base, but then it has some extra stuff in it, like the H1. Oh, and sure enough, here is our big H1 with the color white. So if I change that to black or a dark gray, that'll help. Oh, here's another issue right here. So when you're in an app like this and it's just littered with accessibility problems, as you go to poke around, you might identify other problems while you're in there. And part of the challenge is that you might not be able to fix everything in one go. Like maybe you can, like maybe your team will just be like, cool, fix it. But sometimes you really have to get approval, like maybe you need to get the work onto the schedule. Like sometimes there's some bureaucracy that you have to negotiate around, even if it's like, just let me fix it. So yeah, it's gonna depend on your situation what you can like get away with in the moment, but if I saw this in an app, I would just go fix it. So there's a div, that was the modal sign-up one that we couldn't reach. I'm gonna give it an ARIA label of open, let's see, newsletter sign up. I mean, it is a modal, but that's not really the important thing. It's like, what do you want the user to know about this button? Especially this is for a screen reader user. So I'm gonna say open newsletter sign up. And that's another accessibility issue that we saw. So I guess for mechanics, we had our sidebar. It would be great to go and fix some of that. So we've got this menu. Two or three things that I would like to do in the time that we have are, so when this menu slides out, and this is a really common thing in not only React applications, but JavaScript applications in general, is that when you have these layers and modal dialogues, you need to handle focus when it opens. And then it did work with the escape key, that's awesome, but it should send your focus back to whatever element you came from. And we need to hide the inactive items. And there's a number of ways you can do that. I'm gonna use the HTML inert attribute, which is available in Chrome behind a flag. You can use a polyfill from the Web Incubator community group. And that will, you can put it on content that maybe it's like, when we have this modal open, actually, this is another example. The layer behind, you can kind of see it back there. So it doesn't have CSS display none on it, but it's not supposed to be interactive. So for a keyboard user, if that background was not disabled, or for screen readers too, they can get stuck back there. And especially in applications where there's like multiple layers, that can be very disorienting. So inert will allow us to easily prevent assistive technology from like even identifying that content and from reaching it with keyboard, because you kind of need both. So we're going to play with inert. Oh yeah, and my close button is like completely broken, which I've also seen in a real app. Like if you don't have automated tests, and I don't think we're going to get to automated tests, we're pretty close to the end here, but there's stuff that just gets broken all the time. Like not only for accessibility, but for everyone. And like that might be some leverage for you to take to your teams. It's like, hey, I saw this feature was broken. We should have some automated testing for that. And we could test for accessibility as well. So that would be super cool. So this menu, the first thing I think that we could probably do in the time that we have is to go and add that inert attribute. So before I get ahead of myself, so menu, it's a component. It's imported up here at the top from a folder called menu, and then there was a folder or a file in there. This menu component is a React component. So a lot of what Gatsby will do is sort of like, they handle a lot of the heavy lifting with React componentry for you. So it's actually a lot easier. That's part of why I like it and why I started using it. This is sort of a bridge to the older, like more independent way of working with React. So it has a lot more code and stuff in it. But it still works. They still work together because they're all React. So what we need, if I scroll down past all of these logic methods and things, so this is where you start to see where JSX is different than plain HTML. There are attributes with dynamic, like maybe class names get toggled on and off depending on the state. Like if it's inactive, you could use JavaScript to kind of change what CSS is doing and change how that impacts users. Here is a div with a click event on it. I think that's actually the layer. Which layer is that? That's like a menu wrapping layer. So we want to add the inert attribute so that it wraps everything inside of the menu, but not containing the button that we need to get to open it. So so the menu icon, which a little bit of a tip, if you have a control, like a UI control with the word icon in it, maybe it's a way of identifying that like that's probably not keyboard interactive. So a menu button would have been better. And those are components that I would need to go fix in those files. So it's sort of a trail of like finding where the problems are. So this div, that's the one that contains everything. I think this is the one we want. Let's go try. So how I'm going to add this in JSX. So it will render to HTML, but I can use some logic inline. So I'm going to say, yeah, I guess inert. And I am going to add some stuff here. So we want it to actually put the attribute inert onto the element. And it says class name, by the way, because that's React's way of, like, class is a protected word in JavaScript because it's like a JavaScript code thing. So class name will output class, which is the valid HTML, just as like a side note. So for inert, we need some sort of a state. If the menu is open, so I think that would be like this dot props, which are the like data that's being passed into this component. Let's see, is there like an is open? Yes, this dot state dot is open. So it's state, not props. So those props are like you're giving it a new title or like some data. And state is reacting to what the user is doing. Like maybe you want to programmatically open this thing by like hitting the slash key or something like really random. Back in jQuery time, that would have been a lot of event handling, like manual, updating the DOM and doing a lot of that. Now we can pass props and state through React, and it's a lot easier to kind of react to what the user is doing. So this .state.isOpen, I'm going to put a ternary operator here, which is like an inline if-else. So if it is open, we want the inert attribute to be here. So I'm going to say inert, because it is a Boolean attribute, which means that it's just the presence of the attribute in HTML is what we want. So it would say inert on, this could be on a div or on a section or whatever element you're using, but it doesn't have a value. But we need to kind of trick React into adding it. So If it is open, we're going to add the inner attribute. If it isn't open, we'll just pass null so that maybe it will skip it. So let's go test that and see if, nope, I don't think it worked. Let's go inspect. It did not work. So we can go inspect again, see what's happening. Maybe I got it backwards. Or maybe I put it on the wrong element. Maybe I have an error. Let's go check. Fun. Use state. I am not sure. So.
I think it's backwards. It's saying if it is open, it's in a, otherwise it's not.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think I can even just pass it an empty string. I wasn't seeing it getting added, so, oh, wait.
I think it can be true or false as well, because React turns those into...
Yeah, well, if it's truthy, so there's this concept of like truthy and falsy, and if it has a truthy value, it should just evaluate to true. But we'll try it. If it is true, we want...
The actual attribute value would be true or false. Otherwise, it would be if that's right, that could be...
Well, so that's what I was saying. It's a Boolean attribute. So the value doesn't matter.
Oh.
It's just the presence of the attribute. So if it's open, we don't want it. If it is closed, let's go see. And you know what we can do in case I'm just not getting this right in the moment, because live coding, it's an exploratory journey. We could just go manipulate it right here in the browser. And so that's what's really fun, is like you don't necessarily have to be, like I'm showing you things that some of which are really specific to React, but some are not. And one thing we could just do is go and open this and make sure we can identify which element we want to put it on. So I have this menu wrap, and if I close it and I just go click in here and add attribute, so I hit the control key and add attribute, I can just say inert. And so it's in here, it's just the Boolean, so no value. And now if there we go, so my React foo is off. But we have still have a number of issues. However, that is one thing that's what we need to add to the markup to fix that one problem of not focusing in these items when the menu is closed. Something I am curious about is why our text color didn't change, because I changed that to black. So maybe my server isn't actually working or something. And it might be, so this is sort of my like control panel of what's happening is my terminal. So there's lots of good warnings, and I think actually what happened is like I had it sort of working and then I broke it intentionally, and it's probably like, I don't know, I maybe didn't get that quite right. So, because that should have changed in our header. We changed a number of items, like this color should be different. And it is not, but that's okay, because I think it's already 8. So hopefully, let's just change this. We'll just like fix some stuff real quick and dirty here in the browser. Yeah, I think like it didn't compile or something. That looks like what happened. So this is kind of cool actually in DevTools. If you change an element, it will update the closing tag for you. So you don't have to go and change it. Like they're live updating it while I type. So I'm changing it from a div to a button. I can hit the enter key. The one I really wanted to change was this menu button. So that's a div. That should be a button. And it also needs a label. So maybe like aria label of open menu. And when the menu is, so when it's closed, you want to say open. When it's open, you want to change that label. So you should be updating it. And that's where those inline conditionals in React can be really useful, because you can actually change it on the fly. One other quick thing that I didn't really cover, and I think actually we weren't able to see a focus outline on this button because it was a div. So with that, I hope that you've kind of gotten a glimpse into the debugging process, because even if you're not a React developer, being able to go and look at some of these applications and understand like how did they get made that way, and sometimes it's just completely because people aren't educated about it. Sometimes, I don't know, there's just like lots of cooks in the kitchen and not everyone has the same skill level. So that's where we as accessibility professionals and passionate people can try to help a little bit. And yeah, so if you've got some questions, I know we kind of just like rammed right through the question time. But yeah, so thanks so much for having me, and I hope it was beneficial. So yeah.
If you want to ask a question in the audience, Raf's got a mic. There's a couple on the website. First one is, so VoiceOver is on the Mac only.
Yes.
If you have Linux or Windows, what would you use to test speech?
So on Windows, I would recommend NVDA and JAWS, of course. JAWS has a license that you can technically use for 40 minutes at a time, but I think their terms of service say that you're not supposed to do that, so I would recommend NVDA.
Yeah.
And that's what DQ uses. They're one accessibility vendor, and NVDA is open source and free, and it's really good. And so I think it's solid enough, and enough people with disabilities use it that I would recommend NVDA. For Linux, I've heard Orca. Does anyone use anything else on Linux?
That's all I've heard of.
Just Orca. Yeah, I'm not a Linux user myself, but Windows I will frequently, so if I was going to test on Windows, I use Parallels now, which is a virtual machine software, and it really smooths out some of the like key mappings and like file system access on the Mac side and all of that stuff. It does require a license, but it's also good to have a physical Windows machine because there's some bugs that you just can't reproduce on virtual machines.
And then what automated testing do you normally use for regression testing?
For regression testing, yeah, so that's something we didn't quite get to today. In Gatsby, we use Cypress. So I actually have a tab here for a little utility called Gatsby Cypress. And Cypress is in the realm of like Selenium WebDriver, so an end-to-end testing framework that will open a real browser instance, which is more like what a user would be in. And I really like Cypress. They have a lot better documentation than Selenium, and it's just got like an interactive user interface that's pretty cool. I haven't tested it for accessibility, but you can also just use it like in your continuous integration. Write some automated tests that way. I just really like their APIs for regression testing. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Cool. There's even a Cypress Axe utility that you can use, and it sort of injects Axe into the Cypress browser instance for you, and it's pretty slick.
Cool, thank you. So is anyone in the audience, then we can run a mic to you.
Hello.
Hi.
So to make the menu links disabled when the menu was closed, you use the inert polyfill. And I'd like to know, in your experience recommending using this polyfill, have you ever met some resistance from developers because it's a package that's got to be downloaded? And if that's the case, what alternative would you recommend?
Yeah, occasionally. That's a really good question. So occasionally, yeah, there might be reasons why you can't download a polyfill, maybe for performance reasons. I mean, a good reason to use it is that we're really trying to get it back into web standards so that it would just be available and be a standard. But some alternatives are, so this is why inert is so useful. I mean, you can use CSS. So when the menu was closed, I could use CSS display none or visibility hidden. Display none would affect the visual display, so you might need to use CSS animations and like change it at the beginning or the end of a keyframe animation. You can also, I mean, the way I've done it in the past is to add aria hidden of true, so that would go on the menu itself, and then every link inside of there would need tab index of -1. To make it so it's not reachable from the keyboard. That method of doing it is really hard. because you have to walk the DOM. I mean, for pattern libraries and JavaScript frameworks, you don't have control over where these, like modal might be like buried, and actually inert might be tricky there too. So you don't always have control over the markup you're trying to disable. So in that case, maybe the aria hidden and tab index method would work, but you need some sort of a utility to go walk up the DOM tree, remember what tab index was on things, and then walk back down. Like, you know, you're like doing this walking. So that can be performance heavy as well. If you can just like have a modal dialogue that's like siblings to your content, that way it's really easy. It's kind of like an isolated thing that you can disable. This is just a really hairy problem, trying to walk the DOM. I did it in Angular, and it was some of the hardest code I've ever had to do. It's cool, but it's like, it's difficult. So yeah, if you have more questions about that, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. And yeah, voting in inert attribute in all the browsers. Like, I think really Chrome is the only one that has it behind a flag. And yeah, I hope that we can get some momentum there just because it solves such a big need that we have to disable things.
Thanks.
Cool. So we'll probably have to stop it there.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Can people find you on Twitter?
Yes, Marcy Sutton on Twitter. And there's also a web accessibility Slack that I run. It's web-a11y@slack.com. And you can tweet at me if you aren't already in that group. It's invite only right now until we get a better system. But that group is consistently really helpful. There's people in all time zones just like super ready to help. I think Scott O'Hara like works in all of the time zones. But yeah, if you ever have a question about technical accessibility or policy or events, there's an events channel in there and all kinds of good stuff. So yeah, maybe if there's enough interest from more than one person, maybe we can like do a group email or something like that.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks everybody.
Well, thank you so much.